The rain hammered against the barn's rotting roof as Eleanor Hayes pressed herself into the corner, clutching the silver locket, her mother's last gift, in trembling fingers. 3 days without food, 2 nights running from Marcus Thornton, the man her father had sold her to for whiskey money and 50 acres of worthless scrubland. Her wedding dress, once white, now hung in muddy tatters around her ankles. The barn door crashed open. Eleanor's heart seized. But instead of Marcus's cruel face, a younger man stood silhouetted against the storm, broad-shouldered, dark hair plastered to his forehead, eyes the color of creek water in summer. "Please," Eleanor gasped, holding out the locket with shaking hands. "Take this. It's real silver. Just let me stay until morning. I'll disappear, I swear it." Before we continue with Eleanor's journey, I'd love to ask a favor. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. It truly means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from right now? At home? During your commute? Let me know in the comments. The man stepped inside, water streaming from his canvas coat. He didn't reach for the locket. Instead, he grabbed a horse blanket from a hook and approached slowly, hands visible, movements careful, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Keep your silver," he said quietly. "I'm Daniel Montgomery. This is my father's farm. You're safe here." "No one is safe," Eleanor whispered, but she was shivering so violently, her teeth chattered. "He'll find me. He always finds me." Daniel draped the blanket around her shoulders, his calloused fingers barely brushing her collarbone. Even that ghost of contact made her flinch. He noticed, stepping back immediately. "Who's looking for you?" "Marcus Thornton. We were supposed to marry yesterday, but her voice cracked. "I couldn't. I ran." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Thornton, the man who beat his last wife to death and called it an accident." Eleanor's silence was confirmation enough. "You're not going back," Daniel said, and there was something absolute in his tone, like a judge's gavel. "Ever. You don't understand. Your father doesn't own you. No man does." Daniel moved to the barn entrance, scanning the darkness beyond. "Thornton's a coward who preys on women, because he knows men would put him in the ground. He won't touch you here." "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Daniel turned back, those creek water eyes holding hers with unexpected gentleness. "My mother ran from a violent man once. A farmer's son named Thomas Montgomery took her in, married her, gave her a life worth living. That farmer's son became my father. Guess kindness runs in the family." Over the following weeks, Eleanor discovered Daniel hadn't exaggerated. Thomas Montgomery, weathered and gray-bearded, welcomed her with the same quiet acceptance as his son. Their farmhouse, modest but sturdy, became a sanctuary she'd never known existed. "You can cook?" Daniel asked one morning, finding her preparing breakfast before dawn. "I can earn my keep," Eleanor said defensively, flipping flapjacks with practiced efficiency. "That's not what I asked." Daniel poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "Can you cook because you want to, or because someone taught you survival comes with conditions?" The question hit harder than any of Marcus's backhands. Eleanor's spatula trembled. "I don't know anymore." Daniel set a cup beside her. "Then let's figure it out together. But Eleanor, you're not here on conditions. You're here because you're a person who deserves safety. Everything else is your choice." Those words became Daniel's refrain when he taught her to ride his gentlest mare. "Your choice if you want to learn." when he offered her the spare bedroom instead of the barn. Your choice where you sleep. When he suggested she might enjoy helping birth a calf. Your choice if you're ready. Choice. Such a simple word, but it rebuilt her from the inside out. One afternoon, Daniel found her in the vegetable garden, hands deep in rich soil, face tilted toward the sun. Something in his chest shifted, a lock turning that he'd thought rusted shut since Sarah died 3 years ago. He'd promised himself never again. Loving meant losing, and he'd already lost enough. But Eleanor laughed at something a butterfly did, and the sound made him forget promises. "You're staring," she said without looking up, though her cheeks flushed pink. "You're different than when you arrived." "I'm remembering who I was before fear." Eleanor sat back on her heels, dirt streaking her borrowed trousers. "Before my mother died, before father started drinking, before Marcus." Daniel crouched beside her, close enough to smell lavender soap and sunshine on her skin. "Who are you?" "Strong," she whispered. "I think I was strong once." "You're still strong. You survived. You ran. You chose life." His hand hovered near hers, not touching, respecting the boundaries she needed. "That's the bravest thing I've ever seen." Eleanor's fingers moved first, closing the distance, dirt-stained and trembling, but reaching. Daniel's palm met hers, calluses against calluses, and held on. "Please stop. I'm crying," she moaned, tears streaming despite her smile. "Me too, Angel," Daniel whispered, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "But I can't let you go." They stayed like that, hands clasped in the garden dirt, until shadows grew long. But peace never lasted in Eleanor's experience. She should have known. Marcus Thornton arrived on a Tuesday, flanked by 2 hired guns and Eleanor's father, stumbling drunk in the saddle. They rode up the farm's entrance like a pestilence, dust and malice. Daniel met them on the porch, rifle cradled but not aimed. Yet, his father stood beside him, shotgun loaded. "That's my bride you're harboring," Marcus called, all false charm and underlying threat. "Her father here has legal documents. She's contracted to me." "Contracts can't buy human beings," Daniel replied evenly. "Not anymore. War settled that." "She's my daughter," Eleanor's father slurred. "I'll say where she goes." Eleanor emerged from the house before Daniel could stop her. "No, you won't. Not anymore." Marcus's smile turned reptilian. "Eleanor, darling, I've missed you. Come down here. We'll forget this unpleasantness." "I'd rather die." "That can be arranged." Marcus's hand dropped to his pistol. 3 things happened simultaneously. Daniel moved in front of Eleanor. Both Elder Montgomery's shotgun and Daniel's rifle snapped up, and Marcus's hired guns drew their weapons. "This is simple mathematics," Thomas Montgomery said calmly. "You're on our land. Castle doctrine applies. You draw, we shoot, and the law sides with us. Your move, Thornton." Marcus's eyes calculated, finding odds he didn't like. "Fine, we'll do this legal. Judge Harper owes me favors. We'll see what he says about stolen property and broken contracts." They rode off, but the threat lingered like smoke. "He won't stop," Eleanor said quietly that night. She and Daniel sat on the porch, close but not touching, watching stars emerge. Judge Harper is his second cousin. He'll rule for Marcus, and then we fight, Daniel said simply. "You could die. I could live and lose you. That's worse." He finally looked at her fully, letting her see everything he'd been guarding. "I know it's too soon. I know you've got healing to do. But Eleanor, When I imagine tomorrow, you're in it, and the day after, and every day until I'm old and gray and arguing with you about whose turn it is to feed the chickens. Daniel, you don't have to say anything. I just need you to know you're not alone in this. Whatever comes, we face it together. Eleanor took his hand, lacing their fingers with deliberate intent. Together, she echoed. The hearing came swift and ugly. Judge Harper, bloated and bourbon-breathed, barely listened to Eleanor's testimony about Marcus's violence. The contract her father signed loomed large, legally questionable, but backed by the judge's bias. Marriage contracts are binding, Harper pronounced. Miss Hayes will return to Mr. Thornton's custody immediately. No, Eleanor said clearly. Contempt of court? I said no. She stood, spine steel. I'm not property. I'm a person, and I choose to stay with Daniel Montgomery. Marcus lunged for her. Daniel intercepted him, and chaos erupted. Marcus's hired guns drew weapons. Thomas Montgomery and 3 neighboring farmers who'd come in support blocked the exits. Eleanor grabbed a bailiff's baton and cracked it across Marcus's knee. In the confusion, shots fired. Daniel took a bullet meant for Eleanor, the impact spinning him sideways. He dropped, blood blooming across his shoulder. Daniel! Eleanor was on her knees beside him, hands pressing against the wound. Stay with me. Please, stay with me. Go slow. It hurts, he gasped, trying to smile, always trying to shield her from worry, even now. I'll die before I hurt you, she whispered fiercely. But you're not dying today. Do you hear me, Daniel Montgomery? You promised me tomorrow. You promised me chickens to feed. One of the farmers, Doc Peterson from 3 miles west, pushed through. Get him to my surgery, now. The next hours blurred. Eleanor refused to leave Daniel's side while Peterson extracted the bullet and stitched the torn muscle. She held Daniel's hand through his fever dreams, whispered promises she'd never thought she could make, and discovered that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was loving someone enough to be terrified and staying anyway. When Daniel finally woke, pale but clear-eyed, Eleanor was still there. You saved me, he said hoarsely. You saved me first, she replied. I figured I owed you. Eleanor Hayes. His good hand found her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I love you, not because you need saving, but because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because you laugh at butterflies and cry in gardens and face down armed men without flinching. Because when I imagine my life, I only see joy if you're in it. I love you too. The words came easier than she'd expected, natural as breathing. I didn't think I could. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe enough to love anyone. But you taught me that love isn't about possession. It's about choice. And I choose you, Daniel. Every day, I choose you. He kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of his injury, but unable to wait. Eleanor kissed him back, tasting salt and relief and the future they'd both almost lost. The legal aftermath sorted itself eventually. Judge Harper, faced with testimony from a dozen witnesses about his corruption and Marcus's violence, resigned in disgrace. A circuit judge from Denver reviewed the case, declared the marriage contract invalid, and issued a restraining order against both Marcus and Eleanor's father. Marcus, learning that Eleanor had allies willing to fight, finally slithered back to whatever hole he'd crawled from. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in her mother's restored wedding dress, cleaned, mended, and altered by her own hands, in the small church where the Montgomery family had worshipped for 2 generations. Daniel waited at the altar in his father's best suit, shoulder healed but still tender, eyes suspiciously wet. "Who gives this woman?" the pastor asked, mostly for tradition. "She gives herself," Eleanor said clearly, and walked forward alone, head high, every step a choice freely made. Daniel met her halfway, because of course he did. They joined hands, spoke vows about partnership and respect, about choosing each other in good times and hard times, about building something better than what they'd survived. When the pastor said, "You may kiss your bride," Daniel cupped Eleanor's face with infinite gentleness. "I see a woman worth saving," he whispered, echoing words he'd said months ago in a barn during a storm. "I see a man worth loving," Eleanor replied, and kissed him with all the strength she'd reclaimed. The reception, held in the farmyard under strings of lanterns, lasted until dawn. Neighbors brought food and music and genuine joy. Thomas Montgomery cried openly, toasted his son's happiness, and welcomed Eleanor as the daughter he'd never had. As the celebration wound down, Eleanor and Daniel slipped away to the porch where so much had been said and decided. The sun was rising, painting the prairie in shades of amber and rose. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, arm around her waist, careful as always of her comfort. "That I ran from one life and found another. That sometimes the worst moments lead to the best people." Eleanor leaned into him, fitting like she'd been measured for this exact space. "That I'm not afraid anymore. Not of anything, of some things. Bad men, storms, losing you." She tilted her face up. "But I'm not afraid of happiness. Not anymore. You taught me I deserve it. We both deserve it," Daniel corrected. "And we're going to have it. Years and years of it. Fights about chickens and all." Eleanor laughed, the sound carrying across the land that had become home. "I love you, farmer's son." "I love you, angel," Daniel replied, and kissed her as the sun rose on their first day as husband and wife. 2 years later, their daughter, named Sarah Grace for the women who'd shaped them, took her first steps in that same garden where her parents had first held hands. Thomas Montgomery, gray in beard but young in spirit, cheered from the porch. Eleanor and Daniel knelt in the soil, arms outstretched, giving their daughter the same gift they'd given each other: the freedom to choose her own path, knowing love would catch her if she fell. The farm thrived. Eleanor's vegetables became locally famous. Daniel's herd grew. They hired 2 farmhands, young men escaping their own hard pasts, and paid them fairly, teaching them that strength didn't mean cruelty. Sometimes Eleanor still had nightmares about Marcus, about contracts and cages. But she'd wake to Daniel's steady heartbeat, his arms around her only because she'd chosen to be held, and remember that she'd survived worse than fear. She'd survived not living. That was the real story. Eleanor often thought, not that she'd been saved, but that she'd learned to save herself. Daniel had simply made space for her to remember how, and in that space, they'd built something neither had thought possible. A life where love meant freedom, where home meant safety, and where tomorrow was always a choice worth making, together. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 years into their marriage. Eleanor was kneading bread dough, flour dusting her forearms, when Daniel walked in from collecting the mail. His face had gone pale. "What is it?" she asked, immediately wiping her hands. "It's from a lawyer in Boston." Daniel's voice was tight. "About Sarah." Eleanor's heart clenched. Sarah, Daniel's first wife, who died of fever 3 years before Eleanor arrived. What about her? She had a sister, Catherine. Daniel sank into a chair, reading. She's claiming that Sarah left a will, that she wanted Catherine to inherit half the farm if anything happened to her. Can she do that? If the will is legitimate. Daniel's jaw worked. The farm has been in my family for 40 years. My father built this place from nothing. Eleanor moved behind him, hands on his shoulders. Then we fight, together. But Catherine Whitmore arrived before they could prepare, stepping off the afternoon stage in Boston finery. Silk dress, feathered hat, and an expression that suggested she'd smelled something unpleasant. Her lawyer, a weasel-faced man named Cyrus Webb, carried a leather satchel bulging with documents. Mr. Montgomery, Catherine said coolly, not offering her hand. I see my sister's home has been maintained. Your sister's home? Thomas Montgomery stepped onto the porch, his shotgun conspicuously absent, but his presence no less formidable. Sarah married my son. That made this her home and his, not yours. We'll let the courts decide. Webb smiled, without warmth. We have a properly executed will, signed and witnessed. Mrs. Whitmore is entitled to 50% of all assets, including land, livestock, and structures. Eleanor watched Daniel's hands clench. She'd seen him face down Marcus Thornton without flinching. But this threat cut deeper. It attacked the legacy his father had built, the life they'd created. Sarah never mentioned a will, Daniel said quietly. She never mentioned wanting Catherine to have anything. My sister and I had a complicated relationship, Catherine admitted. She left Boston to marry a farmer against our family's wishes. But blood is blood, Mr. Montgomery. She wanted me provided for. Provided for? Eleanor couldn't help herself. You're wearing a dress that costs more than our entire harvest. Catherine's eyes finally acknowledged Eleanor. And you are? His wife, the woman who actually lives here and works this land. How convenient. My sister dies, and within 3 years, he's remarried to someone who just happened to need rescuing. Catherine's smile was poisonous. Tell me, Mrs. Montgomery, did you know about Sarah's will before you married him? Daniel stood so fast his chair toppled. You don't speak to her that way. The truth. Uncomfortable, Mr. Montgomery? The truth, Thomas interjected, is that you're a vulture circling what you think is easy money. Sarah loved this farm. She loved my son. If she'd wanted you to have it, she'd have said so before she died. Webb cleared his throat. Nevertheless, we'll be staying at the boarding house in town while this matter is resolved. We'll see you in court, Mr. Montgomery. After they left, Eleanor found Daniel in the barn, forehead pressed against his horse's neck. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, her presence a comfort he'd learned to lean on. I built this life for us, he finally said. For you, for Sarah Grace, for the children we'll have. If Catherine takes half, then we'll make do with half, Eleanor said firmly. Or we'll find another way. But Daniel, we don't give up. That's not who we are. He pulled her close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. How did I get so lucky? You opened a barn door during a storm, Eleanor reminded him, and you were kind when you didn't have to be. Best decision I ever made. The court proceedings dragged through autumn. Catherine's will appeared legitimate, Sarah's signature, 2 witnesses, properly notarized. But something nagged at Eleanor. She'd heard Daniel's stories about Sarah, seen her portrait, read her letters. The woman in those memories didn't match someone who'd secretly planned to give half her husband's inheritance to a sister she barely spoke to. "Daniel," Eleanor said one evening, surrounded by papers in their bedroom. "When did Sarah die?" "April 14th, 1869. "Why?" "And this will is dated April 1st, 1869, 2 weeks before she died." Catherine claims Sarah knew she was sick, that she wanted to make provisions. Eleanor shook her head. "Sarah died of sudden fever. You said it came on fast. She was healthy one day, gone within 3 days." So how did she know 2 weeks in advance that she'd die? Eleanor's mind raced. Unless the will is forged," Daniel finished, hope sparking in his eyes. They rode to town at dawn, bringing every letter Sarah had ever written. The bank manager, who'd known Sarah, studied her signature. The differences were subtle. A slightly different slant, pressure variations, but they were there. "I'm not a handwriting expert," Mr. Peterson said carefully, "but these signatures don't match perfectly. You'll need a professional analysis." That cost money they didn't have. Eleanor sold her mother's locket, the one she'd offered Daniel that first night, without telling him. When he found out, he was furious. "That was yours, the only thing you had left of her." "And this farm is ours," Eleanor said simply, "the only thing we have to give our daughter. Besides, my mother would have approved. She always said family protects family." The handwriting expert from Denver confirmed their suspicions. The will was a forgery, and a sloppy one. Webb had counted on a grieving widower not looking too closely, on a remote farm town not having resources to challenge it. Catherine's mask slipped when confronted with the evidence. "You don't understand," she hissed. "My husband gambled away everything. I have nothing. Sarah owed me. She married beneath her and abandoned our family." "Sarah made her choice," Daniel said coldly, "and it wasn't you." Judge Morrison dismissed the case with prejudice, and Webb fled town ahead of fraud charges. Catherine left on the next stage, bitter and defeated. But the victory felt hollow. Daniel was quiet that evening, standing on their porch watching the sunset. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. "Sarah," he said softly. "I loved her. She was my first wife, the mother I'd hoped to give my children. And Catherine tried to use her memory to destroy everything we built." Eleanor took his hand. "Sarah loved you. I've read her letters, seen her portrait. She wanted you to be happy. And Daniel, you are allowed to love her memory and love me. They're not competing. You're sure?" "I'm sure." Eleanor smiled. "Besides, we named our daughter after her. Every day, I see Sarah in her eyes, in her laugh. Your first wife is part of our family, Daniel. She always will be." He kissed her then, deep and grateful. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do, and I don't deserve you. But we chose each other anyway. That's what makes it work." Winter arrived hard and early, bringing snow that buried fences and froze the creek solid. Eleanor was 7 months pregnant with their second child, moving slower, but still insisting on helping with chores. "You should be resting," Daniel fretted, watching her gather eggs. "I'm pregnant, not dying. Women have been doing this for thousands of years." "Not my woman, not my baby." Eleanor laughed. "Your woman is perfectly capable of gathering eggs without catastrophe." Famous last words. The ladder to the hayloft, weakened by moisture, gave way beneath her weight. Eleanor fell hard, the world spinning, eggs shattering around her. Pain lanced through her abdomen, sharp and terrifying. "Eleanor!" Daniel was there instantly, cradling her. "Don't move. Just breathe. The baby, she gasped. Daniel, the baby, is going to be fine. You both are. But his voice shook with fear he couldn't hide. Doc Peterson arrived within the hour, examining Eleanor with practiced hands. No broken bones, but she's having contractions. The fall triggered early labor. It's too soon, Eleanor whispered. He's too small. Babies are tougher than we think, Peterson said gently, but it's going to be a long night. It was 3 nights. Eleanor labored in waves of pain that made her previous childbirth seem easy. Daniel refused to leave, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement even when she screamed at him to shut up. I can't do this, she sobbed during hour 36. It's too much. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. You survived Marcus. You survived Catherine. You can survive this. Please stop, I'm crying, she moaned, exhausted beyond measure. Me too, Angel, Daniel whispered, his own face wet with tears. But I can't let you go. Fight, Eleanor. Fight for him. Fight for us. Their son entered the world at dawn, tiny and blue and silent. For 3 eternal seconds, Peterson worked over him, rubbing his back, clearing his airways. Then, a thin, reedy cry that sounded like heaven's choir. He's small, Peterson warned, wrapping the baby in warm blankets. The next few days are critical. Eleanor held her son with shaking arms, counting his perfect tiny fingers, his miniature toes. Thomas, she said, looking at Daniel's father, who'd waited outside all night. Thomas Daniel Montgomery. The old man's eyes flooded. You can't. I'm not. You are, Daniel said firmly. You taught me what it means to be a father, what it means to be a man who protects instead of controls. Our son should carry that legacy. Baby Thomas was a fighter. He nursed despite his size, grew despite the odds, and filled their home with lung capacity that belied his tiny frame. Sarah Grace, now 3, appointed herself his protector, singing him songs and bringing him flowers. Eleanor recovered slowly, the fall having taken more out of her than she'd admitted. Daniel wouldn't let her lift anything heavier than the baby for weeks. I'm not fragile, she protested. No, you're precious. There's a difference. Daniel kissed her forehead. Let me take care of you, Eleanor. You've been strong for so long. Let me be strong for both of us right now. It was harder than she'd expected, accepting help. Eleanor had survived by being self-sufficient, by never depending on anyone. But Daniel was patient, and gradually she learned that accepting care wasn't weakness. It was trust. One afternoon, watching Daniel bottle feed Thomas while Sarah Grace napped against his side, Eleanor's heart squeezed with overwhelming love. What? Daniel asked, catching her expression. I was just thinking about the girl who ran into your barn, how terrified she was, how she thought she'd never feel safe enough to love anyone. And now? Now I know that love isn't about finding someone who makes you feel safe. It's about finding someone worth being brave for. You're worth it, Daniel. Our children are worth it. This life we built is worth every moment of fear I had to push through. Daniel shifted carefully, moving the sleeping children, and pulled Eleanor into his arms. I love you more every day. I didn't think that was possible, but it is. Show me, Eleanor whispered. He did, carrying her upstairs while his father watched the children, showing her with his hands and his mouth and his body that love could be gentle and passionate, respectful and consuming, all at once. Later, Tangled in sheets and drowsy with satisfaction, Eleanor traced the scar on Daniel's shoulder where he'd taken the bullet meant for her. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Getting involved with me? All the danger, the court battles, almost dying?" Daniel caught her hand, pressing it over his heart. "Eleanor, before you, I was surviving, going through motions. After Sarah died, I thought my life was over at 28. Then a terrified woman offered me a silver locket in exchange for a night's shelter, and everything changed. I didn't offer you the locket. You rejected it. Because gold isn't what I needed. You were. You are." He kissed her palm. "Every scar, every fight, every tear, I'd do it all again. Because the alternative is a life without you, and that's no life at all." "Together," Eleanor murmured, eyes drifting closed. "Always together," Daniel agreed. Spring brought trouble of a different kind. A railroad company announced plans to run tracks through the valley, directly through several farms including the Montgomery property. The offer was simple: sell for their price, or face eminent domain. "They can't just take our land," Eleanor protested at the emergency town meeting. "They can and they will," said James Cooper, whose land was also threatened. "Government's backing them. They say progress is more important than a few farms." "A few farms?" Thomas Montgomery stood, age and anger making his voice crack like thunder. "My father died building this land. My wife is buried under that oak tree. This isn't just dirt and grass. It's our lives, our histories, our futures." The railroad representative, a slick city man named Harrison Pierce, smiled without warmth. "Gentlemen, ladies, you're fighting the future. A railroad brings commerce, connection, opportunities. Your children will thank you for accepting progress." "My children will thank me for fighting for what's theirs," Daniel said quietly, but there was steel underneath. Pierce's smile faded. "Mr. Montgomery, I've dealt with holdouts before. They always regret it. Take the money. Buy land elsewhere. Don't make this difficult." "Get off my property," Daniel replied. The battle consumed months. The railroad brought lawyers, politicians, newspapers that painted the farmers as backwards obstacles to progress. Eleanor found herself writing letters to state representatives, organizing meetings, even traveling to the state capitol to testify before committees. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said, watching her prepare for another trip. "This isn't your fight." Eleanor turned on him, eyes flashing. "Excuse me? This land is as much mine as yours. Our children will inherit it. How dare you suggest I shouldn't fight for my family?" "I just meant, what, that I'm not really a Montgomery? That I'm still the scared girl you took in, playing at being a farmer's wife?" Daniel flinched. "That's not fair. Neither is suggesting I should stay home and let the men handle things." Eleanor's voice shook with anger she'd been suppressing. "I love you, Daniel, but sometimes you still try to protect me from everything, including things I need to face. Because I almost lost you. The fall, the labor. Eleanor, I held our son thinking he might die. I held you thinking the same thing. I can't." His voice broke. Eleanor's anger evaporated, replaced by understanding. "You can't control everything," she said gently. "I know you want to keep us safe. But Daniel, life is risk. The railroad is risk. Childbirth is risk. Getting out of bed is risk. You taught me to be brave. Now let me be brave without fearing it'll destroy you." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I'm sorry. You're right. You're always right." "Not always, but in this, yes." She pulled back, cupping his face. "We fight this together, as equals, as partners. Agreed?" "Agreed." The coalition of farmers Eleanor organized became a force the railroad hadn't anticipated. They hired their own lawyer, a young firebrand from Denver named Margaret Chen, who'd made her reputation defending miners against corporate interests. "They're counting on you being uneducated, unorganized, and poor," Chen told them. "We prove them wrong on all counts. We document every conversation, every threat, every underhanded tactic. We make them fight for every inch." Pierce's tactics grew nastier. Mysterious fires, poisoned wells, equipment sabotage. But every time they pushed, the farmers pushed back harder. Eleanor was in town when she overheard Pierce in the saloon, drunk and bragging to his associates. "The Montgomery woman is the problem," he slurred. "Get rid of her and they'll fold. She's the spine holding them together." Eleanor slipped out, heart pounding, and found Daniel at the feed store. "We need to talk," she said quietly. That night, after the children slept, she told him everything. Daniel's face went through several colors, finally settling on a dangerous calm Eleanor had learned to recognize. "You're not going back to town alone," he said. "I'm not hiding either. No, you're going to keep fighting, but I'm going to make sure Pierce understands what happens if he threatens you." "Daniel." "Eleanor, I've been patient. I've been lawful. I've played by rules. But if he touches you, if he even looks at you wrong, I will end him. And I won't lose sleep over it." The darkness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Eleanor felt oddly comforted. This was the man who'd stood against Marcus Thornton, who'd taken a bullet for her. His protection wasn't about control, it was about love. "We end this legally," she said firmly, "but together." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Thomas Montgomery, digging through old property records in the courthouse basement, found the original land grants. The railroad surveying maps had errors. Their planned route actually crossed federal land, still held in trust for the local Arapaho tribe. "They can't use eminent domain on land they don't own," Chen said, barely containing her glee. "And the tribe has treaty rights. This changes everything." Eleanor reached out to the tribe's council through a mixed-race trader she'd befriended at the market. The meeting was tense. The Arapaho had little reason to trust white farmers. But Eleanor spoke honestly about shared interests. "The railroad takes your land first, ours second," she explained to Chief Gray Wolf. "But if we stand together, we can stop them." "And when we stop them, will you still stand with us, or will you forget us as soon as you're safe?" The chief's eyes were sharp, assessing. "I can't speak for everyone," Eleanor admitted, "but my family will. My children will grow up knowing that honor matters more than skin color." Gray Wolf considered, then nodded. "We will fight together." The combined legal challenge, farmers and tribe united, forced the railroad to the negotiating table. They couldn't buy off the tribe, and they couldn't afford the publicity of forcibly removing both groups. Pierce left town in disgrace, and the railroad rerouted around the valley. The victory celebration lasted 3 days. Eleanor found herself dancing in the barn with Daniel, music and laughter surrounding them, her feet barely touching the ground. "We did it," she breathed. "You did it. You organized everyone. You found allies. You fought." "We fought," Eleanor corrected. "Always we." Daniel kissed her, long and deep, not caring who saw. "Have I mentioned lately that you're extraordinary?" "Not since this morning." "Unacceptable. I'll have to be more attentive." Eleanor laughed, the sound carrying across the farm that was truly, finally, forever theirs. 5 years later, Eleanor stood in the same garden where she and Daniel had first held hands. 4 children now played in the yard: Sarah Grace at 8, Thomas at 5, and the twins, Rebecca and Ruth, at 3. The farm had expanded, prosperity hard-won, but genuine. A young woman came up the road, carrying a single bag, eyes frightened and desperate. Eleanor recognized that expression. She'd worn it herself once. Daniel appeared beside her, following her gaze. Think she needs help? I know she does. They walked down together to meet her. The girl, barely 19, clutched her bag tighter as they approached. Please, she said quickly. I'm not a thief. I'm running from a man who says he owns me. I heard in town that a woman named Eleanor Montgomery once ran too, that she found safety here. Eleanor's eyes met Daniel's. His slight nod told her everything she needed to know. What's your name? Eleanor asked gently. Rose. Rose Palmer. Well, Rose, I did run once, to this very farm, and the man who found me asked me if I needed help. Eleanor held out her hand. Let me ask you the same. Do you need help? Rose's eyes flooded. Yes, please, yes. Then come inside. You're safe now. This is a place where women get to choose their own lives. Eleanor glanced back at her children, playing without fear, growing up strong and free. And maybe, if you want, you can help teach my daughters that same lesson. Daniel took Rose's bag, and they walked together to the house, past the garden where love had first taken root, past the barn, where a desperate girl had once offered silver for safety, past the life they'd built from broken pieces and second chances. That evening, after Rose had been fed and given the spare room, Eleanor and Daniel sat on their porch, watching the sunset over land that bore their sweat and their love. You think she'll be okay? Daniel asked. She will, because someone taught her she's worth saving. Someone will teach her she's worth loving. And maybe if she's lucky, she'll find someone who sees her for who she really is. Daniel pulled Eleanor close. Like I found you. Like we found each other, Eleanor corrected. I was lost. You were grieving. We both needed saving. We just saved each other instead. Best bargain I ever made. Eleanor laughed. I offered you a silver locket. You got 4 children, a wife with opinions, and a lifetime of chaos. Worth every moment. Daniel kissed her temple. Though I'd have taken the locket too, for the record. It's in Sarah Grace's jewelry box. I bought it back last year. Eleanor, family heirlooms should stay in the family. And this is my family. This farm, these children, you. This is what my mother's sacrifice bought me. A chance at real life. I'd say that locket did exactly what it was meant to do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge. Inside, Rose's soft crying had quieted. In the nursery, their children slept peacefully. In the barn, horses whickered contentedly. Everything and everyone safe, protected, loved. Together, Daniel whispered, the word they'd built their life around. Always together, Eleanor replied. And in the gathering darkness of a prairie evening, on a farm won through courage and kept through love, 2 people who'd saved each other held tight to the life they'd chosen, one day and one choice at a time. The future was uncertain. Challenges would come. But Eleanor Montgomery, who'd once been Eleanor Hayes, frightened, alone, and desperate, knew now that she could face anything. Because she wasn't alone anymore. She never would be again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Eleanor and Daniel's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.